back to another episode of Detonation. Listen, in the house, we have back Ben Zion and Kimberly Forsyth. Why? Because we have so much news to go over. There's just tons and tons of news to go over. So, welcome back to Detonation, Ben Zion and Kimberly Forsyth. Nice to see you.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, no problem. So Ben, we're going to start with you because you're there on the ground in the US, and you've just been to a huge function with Radfest, and Newton Lee was there, and it was a huge book signing, and all the big players were there. So please enlighten us of what's happened. That was a huge news story. Please tell us everything that happened.
Well, some incredible things going on over the course of that weekend and in recent days. Really exciting things happening in front of the camera and behind the scenes. But one thing I do want to talk about is that the Future is New Deal podcast is producing a companion piece to this seminal work, a wonderful, wonderful book that everyone should buy. If you can't spend the money to buy it, borrow your friend's copy. Find the synopsis online. Get the chapters that you can get a hold of, because this is worth your time to look at this book, The Transhumanist Handbook. And we have a companion piece that is a short introduction from each of the authors, from each person who contributed a chapter, talking about the impact of their chapter in a minute or two. And so we have all of those guys talking on camera, and that video is going to be available to people to maybe help them with as a nice companion piece to this book. So we were working on that this weekend. Aside from all of the conferences and talks, which were wonderful, I got people to sign my book. I got people to be just giving me a little more insights into their work, which was incredible. We also did a panel discussion with Charles Holstoppel, a candidate who was there, myself, and of course Gennady and our friend Aaron. And we talked a little bit about that, so that's going to be up in a few days. We encourage people to check that out and get a little bit of a post-mortem on that event. I also did a podcast with Gennady on a specific set of subjects around intellectual property and artificial intelligence. But this was an incredible podcast. We did talk about the event as well, so you can check that out. That'll be broadcast tomorrow. I encourage people to have a look at that. But it was an incredible event, a real inspiration, a collaboration with the U.S. Transhumanist Party, the California Transhumanist Party, and Newton Lee, the good people of Radfest, and of course, Humanity Plus. All of these guys really doing incredible stuff.
Yeah, and these are the big movers and shakers in the movement, and they're not playing games here. Newton Lee is he's the Fukuyama of the movement in more ways than one. And this is super important stuff. So thanks for that update. Kimberly, you're there in Estonia. You have news for us as well. What's been happening there on the ground in Estonia?
I do, yes. So I have recently submitted proposals to the Estonian government. Several of them have to do with super longevity and anti-aging, as well as utilizing DNA in new and exciting ways. And we're working together. I just attended a meeting last night that is aimed at advancing all of the proposals. And yeah, I'm super excited to work with everybody here. And it seems like, it's just, this country is really just full of amazing innovation. And I couldn't be more excited to be a part of it.
Well, one of the reasons that we're talking to you two is because my government has been talking to me, and they've said, Ben, this meeting here is really fundamental. They said it's really important that Newton Lee and this book is going to be really transformative, and they want more information about it. And Kim, another thing, which we'll get onto in a sec, but they also want to know about these fundamental health changes that's coming, this healthcare revolution they're calling it, and that's going to be really cool. To start, let's go with this Radfest festival. Just go back on your news story there, Ben. Why is this Newton Lee book so important? Why is this compendium so important? And what do the people need to know? Why would my government tell me to ask you these questions?
Very nice, very nice. Well, there haven't been so many books of this kind, bringing together so many scientists and technologists and really, every time. Some of the books that have been written in the past on this subject, they included incredible insights. But as we know, there's a shorter news cycle for tech information than maybe in some other disciplines. If you're reading something in tech that's 4 years old, as if it relates to advanced algorithms, for example, you might as well be reading a novel that's 200 years old. It's good for everyone to stay abreast of what is happening in real time as it relates to techno progress, and that is something that we can say of this wonderful work compiled by Newton Lee, and he also was one of the contributors. He contributed a chapter as well. That also did come up in the conversation with Gennady. We talked about Gennady's chapter, which was very insightful, and a lot of people in our community have read that chapter. They haven't received their copy of the book yet. You need to read that book.
Yeah, so something that keeps coming up when I talk to people in Australia is, and I asked Charlie Cam this question when he came on, but he brushed it aside, and it's a talking point, and it's something I want to put to the Zion Forsyth alliance going on here, is patents. Okay, so the argument is the common question that comes up when we're talking about future technology is future technology just going to be for the elite? Is it just going to be something that gets driven into the hands of the elite? And the common response, the Kurzweil, sort of Charlie Cam and others' response is no. Why? Because the mobile phone. Why? Because mass consumerism. Because when technology is new onto the market, it's new, it doesn't function very well, and it's expensive, okay? And then after a while, once it becomes a mass consumable item, the price drops and the accessibility, the impact and the technology increases. So mobile phones used to do one function, they were really heavy, they cost a lot, they only called. Now they do a million things and they're in a million hands. And so this is the argument all the time that they become a mass consumable item. But the thing is, drones, the small ones we can buy in the shop, yeah, sure. But I mean, big drones, the people can't access them, and it takes certain power and privilege to access that technology, or certain medical advances or something, which is the main theme of this. So Ben or Kim, patents are a problem. Patents are standing in the way of techno progress. They're standing in the way of technology development, and it's something that the Kurzweil Cam sort of ideas they never talk about this. They only ever talk about dropping price points. Have you guys thought about this? Have you guys considered this? And if you have, what's your answer to? And are you in favor of democratizing some of these high technologies that's coming out of the compendiums and that's coming out of Estonia?
Most definitely.
I think even people in the sort of class of Ray Kurzweil, people who we would describe as more anarcho-capitalists than Ray Kurzweil, really stop, and it gives them pause to consider this issue, because the dangers of not having this sort of things, at the very least, very transparent, if not highly open source, are considerable. It's a danger. It's a danger of akin to runaway technology disrupting entire civilizations. So it's interesting because Gennady and I had a conversation, and Gennady's a brilliant man, and he's considered many of these things. I would encourage people to be looking for this podcast tomorrow, and because his insights into this are significant. Now, I will say that some people, not speaking of Gennady, but many people might have slightly differing approaches to some issues around regulation from myself. There's a definite difference of opinion to some degree along the people who I would describe as center-right libertarians, myself, who I've described as a center-left libertarian, on some of these approaches. But in the course of this conversation with Gennady, he took a position which was quite copy leftist on this particular issue. And I think a lot of people see people who otherwise want to see that IP being used by these organizations themselves. When it comes to superintelligence, they are willing to concede that we need to be democratizing that to a very high degree.
And Kim, so what about the patent industry, the copyright industry? Are you guys for democratization of these technologies? Are you worried about the patent industry getting in the way, or do you agree with the Cam Kurzweil philosophy that the price point will just always drop, and therefore these technologies will always become democratized?
Well, there's a bit of, I can only speak for myself, but when it comes to patents and copyrights, I am heavily against them. And a case in point would be additive manufacturing, now more popularly known as 3D printing. This was available back in the 70s. And I mean, we're talking 40, almost 50 years ago. So for this entire time, we could have had these little 3D printers in our homes and be learning on them and producing things locally. But because of the trademarks, the patents, until it expired, we weren't able to have access to it. So, and even now that we're getting smaller ones, they started out extremely high priced and then it fell down. But that just goes to show, I mean, 40 years ago, we could have had the same thing, and it would have been a lot cheaper now. You know what I mean? So yeah, when it comes to patents and to copyrights, I am dead set against them. We need open source. We need democratization of these technologies. We need to all be involved in it.
You know, that's a really beautiful answer, because Charlie Cam actually did he did some musical number about this, and he does address this in that musical number where he actually says that it's all the things I enjoy or something like that, out of Sound of Music, but he does address this here. He says that the old industries, whether that be oil or finance or the war machines or whatever, the old industries do that they have entrenched power, and they want to hold on to that power. And these liberalizing, democratizing technologies stand in the way of their power, and therefore they'll do everything they can. And this is why I have trouble worrying about this price point theory. And you bringing up the 3D printing in the old in the 70s is a fantastic analogy, because you know we can go back and look at the electric car. We can look at a whole host of things which would have challenged the oil industry or the petrochemical industry or the petrodollar cycle, or a whole host of things. Aircraft, rocketry, and we find that the patent industry and the copyright industry is right there in the middle. Now, where this gets exciting, where this gets interesting, and I'm talking to public health experts here in Australia about this, and they want to know what the Ben Zion Forsyth campaign has on public health, because we know you're looking into Estonia. You've invested a lot of money going to Estonia, and a lot of research in Estonia. And so what is your policy on Estonia? Why are you talking to Florian Marcus? Why are you talking to all these high politicians in the Estonian government? What's going on with the Estonian model that's so good? And what's going on there? We want to know, because we want cheaper healthcare here. We want better healthcare here. We want it. I'm greedy. Let's get it. What's going on over there?
Yeah.
Well, that's the fantastic thing about Estonia is they are a highly digitalized nation, which I know it's been talked about several times on this show already. And they are making continuous advancements in digitalizing their healthcare, opening it up, monitoring for waste and frivolousness and fraud. So it is definitely a very good course that they're on right now. And that's one of the reasons that I came here, is because they are so technologically advanced, and they are looking for more and more moonshot ideas to not only build the country as a whole, but to build, grow outside of its own borders as well, becoming a bit of the next Silicon Valley without all the pretentious, rich, annoying elites. So, yeah.
And it does go beyond. It does go quite a bit beyond simply small changes in the way that we approach technocracy, and our it's not just a little tweak here and there. We are at a point of tremendous change in our societies, and Paul Spiegel, the eclectic law firm, I believe the United States is a leading thinker on this subject. He is a man who's worked towards these kind of initiatives in many ways, and I could mention a dozen other people in the same breath. But we have a very unique opportunity here in the digitalization of public health and public health interventions and public health services, and it is one that I do not think can be understated if we look at the historicity of techno progress. And let me explain this. I'd like you to close your eyes for a moment and imagine that there is in a small country, San Marino is an example where this is being worked on. Estonia is an example of where this is being worked on. And a number of Central and Northern European nations have implementations nearly at this level. But imagine a small country like San Marino, less than 100,000 people. They have adjusted their public health service so that all citizens who have taken an interest, which is everybody likes to be well, everybody likes to be healthy, have access to fully digitalized and data science-driven interventions. They have access to full oversight of their health in real time, every waking moment. And so there is no longer a situation where we have healthcare focusing on end-of-life care. We have now shifted all of that into prevention. And in doing so, we make that cost incredibly low. And this is not something that Kim and I can take credit for. A lot of people are working very hard the world around to see this happen. But what we can do as techno-optimists is frame this discussion so that the city, San Marino, their public health service, full digitalization, full prevention, a city of immortalists. This becomes a beacon to the world. Everyone looks up and said, see this shining city on a hill of immortalists. Now, these people have done the thing that no one else has done in the past. And what did they do? They basically shrunk healthcare costs significantly as well. And why is everyone else not doing this? This is implementable. This shortens the runway to universal longevity escape velocity from many years to perhaps quite a shorter distance. And that is what transhumanists can do and must do.
You know, this to some people might sound like a fruitcake idea, but this is being bandied around by billionaires and millionaires who are going to make a buck. Okay, so if you're out there and you're an investor, Ben is kind of, he's just foreshadowing. He's just sort of being a mouthpiece for some billionaires who are out there trying to say, if you want to invest, I mean, there's a policy option. And you can make a ton of money out of this. I mean, San Marino, it's a good choice. There's other micronations around the world where you could do this. But where we have real implementable policy, could be somewhere like Estonia. And I mean, you're both politically connected to high echelons of the Estonian government. I mean, that's no joke. Maybe not so much San Marino. I'm not sure. I'm not you, but I know for sure the Estonian government. And this it only takes one or two corporations to flip this on its head. And so if you're out there and you're listening and you only want to think about money, then this is an investment opportunity right here. And I mean, that's a lot. I mean, people who get to that escape velocity, I mean, those people are only going to get younger, or they're going to only live longer, which means that the amount of perpetual interest that you could have. Albert Einstein said the interest is the most, the largest force, the most destructive force in the universe, or the biggest force in the universe. This is something that you'll have infinitely. So it might sound like a fruitcake idea, but it's being pushed by billionaires and millionaires who are out there. And it's interesting that it's filtered all the way down to the Transhumanist Party USA to some policy options. So take this very seriously. And I wonder how many other candidates in this race are getting the same information that you guys are, because I haven't heard this yet. Kimberly?
Haven't heard as far as like how much
I haven't heard them talking about these sorts of policy options. I'm not sure if they have the same connections as you guys.
No, most of these people are talking about science fiction and political philosophy in the abstract. They don't they don't concern themselves very much with doing the good work. And this is owing to Kimberly. Kimberly is the one who's built these bridges to Estonia. You know, a moment ago I was speaking rather lyrically about other micronations and implementations, but this is really happening. And these relationships are being cultivated, that is. Of course, Estonia has been doing this for many decades, setting the stage for having the ability to do this. It would be silly for us to step in and say that we're the great catalysts of this. But that's why I wanted to shift that messaging a little bit to the implications of such a thing. But Estonia is an incredible partner to us to some degree, to the USTP, and we hope to cultivate that at the highest levels. And we want people to understand what is at stake here in creating a fully digitalized healthcare. And there's a specific set of implementations. There's a specific set of interventions that are being worked on, and I don't want to. I can't do justice to all of those in this relatively short broadcast, but we can certainly be talking about that as well.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that they're talking about this as well, because Estonia is a NATO member, and you know, healthcare is part of your defense infrastructure. It's part of your human infrastructure, your human capital. So that's super interesting. So Kimberly, what else have you got going on there in Estonia? Is it a nice place to live at minimum?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, it's a lot cheaper than it is in the US. I've never been in a city that's so nice that you can easily, well, as a single person, you can get by on like $1,200 a month. I'm a single mom with 2 kids, and we do about 1,500 to 1,800 euros a month. And we've got a nice 2-bedroom apartment right in the middle of city center, walking distance to everything, to the beach, to entertainment. And one of there's public transit everywhere. And once you become an actual resident, you get access to free public transportation. So that's, you know, hugely nice. And it's just so clean. It's so rare that you see trash, you know, floating along the street. And even though I am aware that there are some areas kind of that are more rural, where you'll find maybe some homeless people or beggars, it's not as prolific as it is in the United States and in several of the other countries that I visited. So it's something that I have never experienced in my life. And the way that they're growing, and it's really interesting to see like some of the old architecture mixed with the new, and buildings that are hundreds of years old, and just a few blocks away you've got these, you know, massive modern skyscrapers. So it's just really so rich with history, and despite what you read on the internet, people are very nice. It may take a little time to warm up to you, but they are extremely nice. And one of the most common questions I get is whether or not people speak English here. A lot of the people do. Estonian, Russian, and English are the most common, but I haven't had any issues whatsoever with speaking only English. So it really is a great place. Oh, and I'll say, my electricity bill, €9 a month, between 9 and 20, depending on how much my daughter plays the Xbox. So, I mean, come on, can you really beat that?
No, that's good. I wish Australia was like that. You know, a good country is built on cheap power. I'm sorry, that's just the truth.
It is.
Probably all that Russian gas. I don't know.
And also Tallinn is an incredible city as a smart city. Estonia is an incredible country as a modern the forerunner in e-governance. This cannot be overstated. Even as things as simple as making public transportation a free good to reduce greenhouse gases. There's an incredible slate of things that are being done in this country.
Also, speaking of the public transportation, they are one of the first to demo the autonomous buses around town. Yeah, and another one of their projects is they're working on making Tartu. I'm in Tallinn, which is up in the north, but Tartu is the university town, and they are planning on doing investing a lot into modern infrastructure there to make it an entire smart city. So they are really, really pushing to lead the world in technology, being applied on the national level.
Yeah, and if you want your country to function better, and you want it to be more like Estonia, like a cheaper, better lifestyle, cheaper, cleaner, brighter. This is the sort of implementation of policy you have to have. And I'm going to have Florian Marcus on this show, and we're going to talk about how to reduce these costs, because in the United States, the amount of GDP that they pump into their healthcare system is absurd. In Australia, it's absurd. We can knock these costs out, and there's a ton of costs that are going into into book work, that's off the blockchain, into maintenance of equipment, of maintenance of. There's a whole bunch of additional costs, administrative costs and others, that is wasted. And it doesn't increase patient outcomes, and that you can better use to build better energy sources, to build autonomous bus, and clean up your streets, and use it on social security to get the homeless off the streets and get them into being productive members of society. It's a nationalist type enterprise, and it's built out of common sense. It just makes sense to me.
It does.
It's come up.
And sorry, real quick. I just want to say one of the things that I guess Estonians often get asked is why in the world they would trust all of their information digitally to the government. And the reason is because of the way that they have structured it. There's high transparency, there's high verifiability. So they've actually been able to, in a very short period of time, gain their citizens' trust more and more and more. And with the increase of use of transparent technology, it's only going up from there. And I think that is a very good model for the rest of the world to follow in.
What were you going to say, Ben?
Well, a moment ago, you alluded to the caprices of the marketplace in certain areas. And, this is a subject that's come up in quite a few of our futurist New Deal podcasts. If you even just look at one thing, like the emphasis on planned obsolescence across many things in the private sector, this is something that is effectively cost over the course of the 20th and 21st century trillions and trillions of dollars, and the trillions of dollars maybe isn't the key feature of this. It's contributed significantly to things like a climate crisis. We could be doing a lot better. We could be marshaling our resources to real ends, and not something which I regard to be somewhat obscene on its face as planned obsolescence, but something that also contributes very little to human development, and something that also has great costs in terms of the toll that it takes on us as human beings and on our world.
Yeah. Planned obsolescence is absolutely horrible on every respect. It's horrible for the environment. It's horrible for your nation. It's horrible for commerce. The only good thing is, it keeps the wheels of I guess capitalism turning. I guess, I mean, hardly, because it ends up eating itself. They say the left eats itself, but this planned obsolescence stuff eats itself in the end as well. And it puts up barriers. Kim was talking about 3D printers in the 70s. It puts up barriers all across the board, and patents are part of that, which is going back to what we were saying before. Talking about, Kim, what you were saying, Australia has a horrible digital healthcare system. We tried to push through some digital healthcare a couple of months ago, or at the start of this year, and it fell flat because Australians do not trust it. They do not trust the government holding on to digital information. Although it's kind of interesting. They don't trust the government on this issue, but they do trust Facebook, and they do trust private corporations. And I don't need to say that. I don't need to say that just as a thing. I know that they vote with that because everybody's on Facebook. So it's kind of interesting how trust Facebook, but then when the government wants to know a bit of data about your health, wow, you can be hacked. But you know what? They'll wear they'll wear a watch, and you see them everywhere. Everyone's wearing a health monitoring watch. So they trust corporations with this information that they don't trust governments. How do you think the Estonian government, Kim, how do you think the Estonian government gets around that trust issue?
Well, like I said, it's a high level of transparency, and the people themselves, they're able, just as an example, their e-voting system, they are able to access it on their smartphone and verify that information has not been changed, and there are several other things involved. And I'll admit, I'm still learning a little bit about how their healthcare system is situated. There's a lot to learn, but it's all about the transparency. It's all about being open and making things available to the public. And if you don't have that, I can understand where people would be very leery to allow government access into their private lives. But another thing that they don't realize is that they get that, a lot of this information from doctors anyway, from stores like CVS who go pick up your prescriptions. Yes, there are laws like HIPAA in the United States, which, prevent certain amounts of information from being disclosed. But when you look at all of the Internet of Things, it's kind of easy for the government and for corporations to piece all of this information together. So they got to realize now that everything is just so interconnected, and if they really want to implement, a more transparent system, then they're going to have to really work at it and be open to the transparency.
In March of this year, before I forget, Ben, I'm going to ask you a question after this. In March of this year, there was an article that I read in Forbes, and it said that the digital you has now flipped to being more valuable than the physical you. So the physical you used to be able to sell a kidney or something. Now the digital you is worth more value, and that's done a flip, especially with blockchain and all the other things. So, Ben, using these tactics, America is divided. Okay, it's divided as we learnt with the lawyer. It's divided in the fact that the states have a lot of power and a lot of say of what they can do, but it's also divided. You've got a lot of libertarians there, a lot of socialists who are equally divided. How could you initiate some sort of trust in a system like Estonia has in their public health sector and implement that as a policy on a national level and say to reduce some of these costs?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. When you all the studies that are done on distrust of government and one another in a civilization, there's so many factors that go into that. It's at a certain point, it's rather like asking the meaning of life to try and unpack all of that. But what we can say is that that digitalization and in a word, crowdsourcing and this level of transparency, all of these things always are moving us forward as quickly as possible. It's why I say that to the center-right libertarians in our organization, our hangers-on, that this e-governance initiative in the Futurist New Deal, this I-voting initiative in the Futurist New Deal, is the shortest distance to a full adhocracy, to a full voluntary state, to a state that respects those ideals of never having anyone do something that they would not want to do. And the preoccupation is with money. For me, the preoccupation is with human development and life, because money is a social construct, but being alive or being dead, that's as real as it gets. And anyone who focuses on just on the economics and not on the human development and longevity, quality of life concerns, I believe they're engaging in some a little bit of disordered thinking.
Kim, when you're in meetings with these government officials, does it ever come up that that somehow this information could be compromised, and it could be compromised by other government forces or other corporations, and used against them, all this open source information. For example, I'm just going to put it out there as the boogeyman, but Russia could take that information, and blackmail the country, sell the country, use the data. Is that come up? The security, personal privacy issues, and all that. Does that come up at all? Do people talk about that, or is it a non-issue? Is it a hype?
Well, of course, there is always concerns. However, I think on a personal level, I am definitely an advocate of making steps towards taking the profit out of people's digital identities, all of their digital information. It's going to, I mean, even with the advent of quantum computing, they're going to be able to break encryption codes like that. And we're closer to that than a lot of people may think. So all of our DataSec, processes right now are kind of going to go out the door. So there are a lot of people who are preparing for these types of things. But when it comes down to it, I think for the most part, also, I get the impression here that even though it is a concern, it's not something that they freak out about like the US does. I mean, at this point, how much, of their information are they really going to be able to hold anybody hostage with? But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's just kind of something they discuss, but I'm not, too into exactly what their plans are.
Because I know, talking to defense analysts, they say that they would love to hack China's information and use that against them, because they have it all there, and it would be great. It would greatly benefit their country to analyze all that data of all their citizens. That would be great. I mean, that's 1.3 billion people. I don't know how many people are on that system exactly, but that would be a great, for China, if America could hold China hostage in that way. So so it's something that comes up. Ben Zion, same question. Security issues around open source and healthcare information and security issues.
Right. Some of these things, the PayPal Mafia guys are running some of these very AI safety initiatives that you guys were just discussing, and I view it as a kind of trade protectionism more than some sort of great humanitarian effort. But there are tremendous implications for such a thing, and it's not even only deriving from quantum computing. That master key, that full decryption algorithm could derive from a few other emerging technology scenarios. That's scary, right? That's scary for heads of state. That's scary for the great lions of capitalism. I don't know how scary it is for the ordinary citizen, just in the way that the disruption that the PayPal Mafia guys put on the marketplace was scary for 20th century titans of industry, but it was relatively good thing for in many respects a very, very good thing for the ordinary citizen.
Let's switch gears now. Let's talk about the race. How are you guys feeling about your race? What's new in your race? And let's talk race related. Kim, open up. How are you feeling about the race? How are you feeling about all the new people? How are you feeling about the extension? How are you feeling about the other candidate profiles? How are you feeling about the H+ divide? Anything you want to talk about?
Well, I think everything's going great on my end. I'm really enjoying connecting with so many wonderful, extremely intelligent people who really challenge me to think in different ways. I am a little, I guess disappointed is not exactly the best word, but I could use it. A little disappointed that there seems to be a bit of a haywire camp kind of, infiltrating. But as long as they bring in an A game and they really want to, take it seriously, then I'm all for it. Bring in lots of different ideas. But other than that, like I said, I'm just having a lot of fun. One of the things that, I really want to push for in all of these discussions is because you're talking about things that are, so scary. I'm really striving to get people to stop thinking in such a fear-based manner. So if you or any of your viewers go and check out the Facebook group, we have some wonderful discussions on there. And yeah, just, come join us, come say hi and see what we're up to.
Yeah, Ben, how's your race going? How are you feeling about the race? All the new candidates, H plus, the divide, the Haywire camp. How are you feeling about all that?
Yeah, well, I think to some degree this is concerns about what someone might be doing, or what might be. It's a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. These cultural transhumanist advocates, they are doing fine work. I think we could have a better class of representative in this regard. I do also think, on the flip side, that if this conversation is chock full of cultural transhumanist concepts and references, every one of these conversations that we're having is chock full of cultural transhumanist references. When you don't talk about policy as the would-be head of a policy club, you're really throwing out 75% of your toolkit in the interest of just kind of seeming like a cool hipster. And that's not a real smart play, and everybody can see through that. But everybody in this race is doing fine work. I want to support them in every way that I can.
We're not quite there, but have you started thinking about the debate yet? Have you started to strategize for the debate? Have you started to think about where you might be placed, which day, who you might have to face? We know you're in an alliance now, so that's a huge play. Kimberly, what about you? Have you started to think about the debate yet, or is it too far off?
No, not really. I mean, I don't mind where I'm placed. I kind of figure it this way, go ahead and hit me with the tough, questions. Hit me with your best shot. Bring it on. Let's hash some stuff out and hopefully stay on target or on point with discussing policy and ways that we can advance the transhumanist party goals. But yeah, I'm excited about it. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Ben, have you started to think about the debate yet?
Yeah. Well, yeah, quite a bit. There's probably about 8,000 things that I could say on this subject.
Say 5 of them.
Okay. Well, the debate is going to be over the course of 2 days. This has been decided. The USTP leadership said that we can say this. This is going to be in late September, leading up to our voting period, and it's going to. There's going to be a lot of excitement, I think, leading up to this debate, because we're going to have some special guests and special guest moderators and so forth that I think people will find really fascinating. But we could also say, of course, that this event is a co-production of some of these organizations that we've described, and also your network, the largest alternative media network in Australia. And so this is going to be a very, very big event. I think people will enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, we're really excited about it as well, and it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be very interesting because there's a lot at stake, especially with controversial topics like the Epstein, H+, and all others. So it's gonna be very interesting. But we've gone way over time. Is there any final comments that you want to make on any of these subjects that we've covered? We've covered a fair bit in this discussion. Kim, start.
No. I think I'm pretty good on this. I enjoy coming on here and talking with you guys about these things. So. Very good.
Really good to have you on again, and we'll see you again soon. Ben, you?
Yes. Well, the healthcare revolution is the most important revolution in the 21st century. We have a civilization with 7.5 billion people on the earth. In a certain light, a fair number of them are living well, but we haven't done our due diligence as a society to advancing the true aims of a real public health standards, and that's a problem, and that is a problem that the My Futurist New Deal and the Ben Zion for U.S. President 2020 campaign was devised to fix. And at first glance, if you're looking at our materials, the Futurist New Deal for America literature, these memes and discussions of this kind, you might say, what does e-governance, what does the federal land dividend, what does these other points have to do with life extension? But all of these things will contribute to a society that can sustain a longevity escape velocity. And really, it's not necessarily, there's a trio of things that are very important, but creating a true public health service, even if it is conceived in a different way in the ways that we've discussed in this country, because we're not even hitting that minimum threshold in this country. We have Medicare for all in only a very specific subset of the population, and we need to be making sure that no one falls through the cracks.
So one of the things I talk to politicians all the time, and they say public health is one of the biggest topics because our national sovereignty is at risk. If we don't hurry up and reduce the cost of this thing and improve the outcomes, more and more of our GDP is going to be shifted towards that. And the problem with healthcare is there seems to always be a healthcare revolution around wartime. It's something Keynesians kind of get right. And it would be nice to have a healthcare revolution, a proper one, where they actually did a sort of Manhattan Project instead of just doing it in wartime with antibiotics or with others. Actually do something fundamental in peacetime when there is capital around, where there's a capital glut. So for me, it's definitely a national security issue. This country that I live in, we only have 25 million people. We only have so many resources. We've got so many issues and so many infrastructure projects to build, so many things to improve, so many roads to build, so much digital infrastructure to improve, so much space technology that we have to get out there. So much innovation we have to build, and yet we're spending more and more on what you said. It's planned obsolescence. So we're spending more and more of our budget on healthcare, diminishing healthcare outcomes for political gain. And a lot of people say it's a fiscal cliff. We're coming up to a fiscal cliff. Figure out some solutions, figure out some way to prevent us from going over the edge, because the healthcare issue, whether people like it or not, whether it's sexy or not, it could be the thing, it could be the catalyst to losing your national sovereignty. And if we want to end up here in this country becoming the 52nd or 51st state of the United States, I mean, we're heading that way because we're going to end up having to choose between China or the United States, security or economics. We're balancing between both. It's not unnatural. We live in this region of the world where all of the other nations are doing it. Japan is the only one that's really on the US's side. Everyone else is divvying on both ends. Taiwan maybe on the US side pretty definitively as well. But everyone else is divvying on both sides. We are as well, because everybody has economic integration with China and security issues with the United States. And one way to guarantee security, a security alliance with the United States, would be to become a United States citizen, to become a state of the United States. So that would guarantee us. But you would lose your national sovereignty, and you have to import all of these bad healthcare policies that the United States has, and I don't want that. But we're on an unsustainable path, and we need a revolution, and we need it now, and we need to drop this. We need to drop this issue because we're spending way too much, and we have so many other investments and so many other infrastructure and digital projects and everything that we need to be paying for, and we're wasting all this money on diminishing healthcare outcomes. So thank you for all your hard work in trying to get to find models and hypotheses and to talk to these these high officials in these high places in order to generate a discussion and focus on getting better health outcomes so that countries like mine can benefit. This is really important, and this is what politicians are always saying. They're saying we want to really improve it, and they don't. Everybody doesn't know what to do. They're saying, do we digitize? Do we do we do this? Do we do that? And it's debate like this, it's discussion like this that's going to pull Western civilization through this tumultuous time if we don't have a revolution now. and the revolution must come. And you guys are the vanguard of this. So thank you for saving my country in a way.
Well, thank you, Steele. I think what we can say of this revolutionary notion, because I see in the comments often on this show people who are skeptical of these ideas, and what we can say of this is that the true revolutions in human history are technological revolutions. The true revolution of the late 20th and early 21st century is a digitalization revolution, and that is something that we can count on. And that is something that we can, as a society, build off of and gain a head of steam from in ways that other revolutions, other revolutionary ideas, we have to approach with some degree of skepticism. Maybe not the ideas themselves, but them reaching the highest levels of government and so forth. This change that we saw in the late 20th and early 21st century, where we had half of the world effectively not having potable water, to now that number has gone down by something like 90%. And that's going to continue. We do not live in a perfect world, but with digitalization and advanced technology at the center of what we do as a civilization, we will get there very soon.
And I do have one more thing I want to say, is no matter what, less talk, less fear, more understanding, more action. Go for it.
I love it. That's very nice. Yeah, that's a good slogan too. Less talk, more action. But yeah, these are debates. These are debates that need to be had. These are issues that are they're not at the forefront of people's mind. They're not sexy. So but they are a debate discussion. But I understand the context that you mean. Absolutely. So thank you very much for coming on this episode of Detonation. We wish you all the best in the campaign, and we'll see you again very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.